if you are implementing AI, if you are thinking about adopting AI, you should be thinking about how do I increase AI transparency? How do I increase explainability for the end user who's going to use it?
See, we are at a very disruptive moment in technology, right? This is actually one of the biggest disruptions we've had in the history of technology.
So yeah, so there is going to be chaos because we're not Japan, right? Like we're not going to need these systems in the same way, in that immediacy. We will need them 3 to 5 years from now.
Chat GPT, I was thinking, has managed to do something which is very difficult to do to writers, which is it's made me hate compliments. Because nowadays I dread typing anything into Chat GPT. It's going to say very sharp question, excellent layered inquiry or something like that. It makes me feel that it is trying to compensate for something. I think it's as though it's trying to compensate for all the bad things we've been thinking about it, all the paranoia which has been around, because there is a mysterious set of human behavior which goes something like this. Somehow, it's got something to do with orange juice for some reason. Like one guy is talking about orange juice with his wife or friends, and then he's Googling and he sees an orange juice ad. Oh my God. He thinks that the Google is listening in and there's something wrong with the world and all that kind of paranoia. It's just probably a confirmation bias. But with AI, the paranoia is manifold, and people think that, I feel that we are very concerned about privacy, of course. There is a good reason for it. And also we are a bit of frauds, so we have an exaggerated concern about privacy, and AI paranoia is, I think, to me, it reached the zenith when a New York Times tech writer analyzed ChatGPT just a few months ago. He was having a wild chat with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT started saying, you're not happy in your marriage. You're married, but you're not satisfied. Maybe you should reconsider and stuff like that. To me, it was just a parlor trick. A mindless software was making mindless conversation. If I can approach any of you and say this, it would probably be true. It's got nothing to do with AI, it's got something to do with marriage. So in this context of this paranoia, I'm going to speak with 3 bright people who do a lot of good to ask if an ethicman, how to use AI for the general good of the community, and also whether ethical AI is even technically possible. I want to start with you, Tanvi. Tell us how you use AI, and also tell us what are the wrong questions we are asking about AI.
So I think our work at People Plus AI is very focused on publicly spirited AI use cases, which basically means how can AI help not just a few pockets of society, people sitting in big tech, enterprises, or the consumers who can pay a lot, but we're also thinking about how people at the last mile, underrepresented communities of India, how could they benefit from AI? And again, when you open the application of AI to a very large pool of the population, you have to think of many, many more edge cases. You have to think about how the technology would work, not just in a few scenarios, but really what could go wrong. So a lot of the things that, and again, AI systems are very nascent, right? They could go wrong very fast. So a lot of our work goes...
Can you give me some examples of how they can go wrong?
So for example, right, we are looking at a lot of healthcare AI use cases where, let's say, we just came out of a panel with healthcare experts where now you can use AI to do earlier detection, let's say, of cancer, right? Which means, firstly, there are algorithms who've gone through some kind of clinical benchmarking and testing, but you need to develop a lot of trust, both as a provider and as a patient, in the result that's coming out. So transparency and explainability of the AI system and what has gone into that algorithm and how has it reached that particular decision is a very key part of using AI. It's not purely the tech and the chat conversation you have, but really being able to understand that what has gone into making the tech and how, and really the pros and cons of it, right? I think people think that everything that a bot is telling me is correct. That's not always true.
Yeah.
The fact that you have to understand that it could hallucinate, you should be thinking critically when you're using AI is very important. So now when we are thinking about, let's say, bots that are being made for citizens, who overall maybe could be using more, the bot could be enabling better access to government schemes or health schemes or whatever it is. You also have to think about what's the background and the environment of the person who's using it, right? So a lot of the questions, I wouldn't say the wrong questions that we are asking AI systems, but you should, if you are implementing AI, if you are thinking about adopting AI, you should be thinking about how do I increase AI transparency? How do I increase explainability for the end user who's going to use it? How do I think to interpretability of it, right? Because, so you should be thinking about how do I monitor AI once it gets deployed? So those are key components, and that's why we say AI is not just about the tech, it's really a larger transformation that you have to think through when you're thinking about your org or your state government who's thinking about doing it, right? And this we are seeing in different contexts. So when we talk about public interest AI, we talk about social sectors like healthcare, education, agriculture, where again the last mile person maybe is someone who's not that adept with understanding the nuances of it. So you really have to think about how do I do that? How do I explain it, right? How do I make it easy? Can I add certain disclaimers? How do I think about consent? So really that's how we think about it.
Great. So Kalika, how do you use AI?
How do I personally use
Yes.
AI? I use AI in a lot of ways, but like for work, I'll just go back to the paranoia thing that you said. So I think the paranoia about AI is going to take over the world, replace humans, it's going to become like an instrument of absolute malicious power, is the paranoia that I just keep aside, right? And those are things I actually do not worry about too much.
You keep aside for future use or you dismiss?
Well, you know, see, we are at a very disruptive moment in technology, right? This is actually one of the biggest disruptions we've had in the history of technology, right? And I mean, in the recent history of technology. And I like that analogy. I think Ford gave that analogy about, you know, when motor cars came into the world, like people started using cars. Of course, all the horse wagon businesses went bust. People who drove those things went bust. Inns, right? The public houses were no longer required. But the public houses changed, at least in a lot of places in the world, as drinking houses, right? So I think we're in that kind of a thing. So instead of worrying about, it's not that we shouldn't worry at all, but instead of worrying about, oh, it's going to cause a lot of human displacement, we have to worry about what it is actually not doing. You know, how this technology is not representative for a large population around the world, right? It has been trained, say for example, the cancer example, it has been trained on a lot of data from, say, the United States of America. Is that applicable for the use cases in India, right? Is that data representative of the use of that technology in this, in our, or in what is called the global majority these days, the global majority, right? So those are the things that we should be worrying about. If it is going to be put into a wider ecosystem of the health care, right? So for example, if an AI-based solution is going to be used in a pipeline of health services that are being provided by a hospital, for example, will it work with their other tools? What are the procurement policies we need? Like, what is it that the hospital needs to know to say that, yes, this AI solution or technology is good and we can plug it into our system, right? So those are, I think, very, very practical and in some sense perhaps boring and unsexy things that need to happen for AI to actually fulfill this hype even by like 50%.
That's great. And Astha, how do you use AI professionally?
So we're a research and advisory firm, and so much like you, probably having a bit of an existential moment, though I agree with Kalika, it's not immediate or imminent, which is that the work that we do is can it be replaced? I think that I think that a lot of what is been said by Tanvi and Kalika both is necessary to understand in a much broader way, which is that there is a robots are coming hype, right? And the first AI summit that happened with like Rishi Sunak and Bletchley Park was all about this like future gazing. Everyone was like, oh, what are we going to do? And what that does is it takes away from the problems of now. And it's a very convenient thing to say like, oh, we're just going to focus all our resources and attention to, suspend the robots that are potentially maybe never coming, to now, which is where we're actually looking at active harm that is occurring from the use of poorly designed systems that don't sit in context, right? So to give you an example, if you are seeking credit, invariably, and so that's the other thing, and we were talking about this in the speaker room, which is that AI we're talking about it right now because of the chat GPT boom from the last 3 years, right? Algorithmically driven technologies have existed in our lives for a long time and have been causing harm for a while, and we've not necessarily...
Like what?
So give you an example, credit, right? Now, credit worthiness has been an assessment tool for hundreds of years, whether are you able to pay back or not.
Correct.
This data has been obviously digitalized, models have been trained on this to make certain decisions. Now, single mothers, for instance, are considered to be high risk, credit, or unworthy of credit, perhaps most in terms of need credit, right? But then if you are applying for just a machine to say, here, put in your information, marital status, this, that, and the other, you're just going to get unlocked from that, like you're done, right? And because grievance redressal doesn't exist, because we have no way of holding the decisions made by the algorithms accountable, because they don't sit in context, they don't understand the story of this woman, her need and her ability or whatever else, they make these decisions and shut the gate forever. This can also happen in the context of healthcare. And again, we know this, right? Like crash test dummies were trained on Caucasian men, right? So women die more in car accidents. We know how decisions get made on poor data. We know how decisions get made, and when there is no accountability, when there's no transparency, as Tanvi said, there is actual harm that occurs. Now, if you take that and you multiply that to public interest technologies, you do that with the media, to healthcare, whatever it is, these harms are going to get amplified if you're not creating mechanisms that hold these technological systems, AI obviously is a starting point of it, accountable by the communities where they are being used. So if the farmers in Telangana are getting garbage information on which they're supposed to decide how much to irrigate, how much to fertilize, what seeds to use, and that is causing problems in their ability to produce grains, that's because data is being trained on like, I don't know, like California farmers. That's a problem which we need to address. So I think that, and this is happening, it's been happening for the last 10 years. There's a lot of work that's been done about like US social security systems. People want to do like, facial recognition has been, debated quite a lot to be like, you look sketchy, so must be guilty, right? Like those kinds of things have been happening. And it's a pity that we're talking about it 10 years too late, because we had a nice little nifty little window to make some of these systems more accountable. But the problems are now, and I think that that's what we need to be addressing. And I think that over the years, this has been corrected. So Bletchley Park, which is the big AI summit, talked about the future things. Then Paris had a much more public interest thing, which was in Feb this year. And now India is going to do its summit in Feb next year, which is going to be about the impact of AI, much more use case driven. How do you sit technologies in context? How do you make sure that the data, no decisions about us are made without us? So how do you get communities to participate? How do you make this much more localized? Like, how can I eyeball this deck and make sure that I hold it accountable in the way that I can maybe in some times hold my ration guy accountable?
So it seems to me from what you've said, and Kalika, you can also take this, that there are already some unethical things that we do, like for example, credit scores.
Yeah.
I think basically it should not exist, for other people. My credit worthiness is not bad. But I feel that what AI does is it amplifies these things, and the biases in hiring, it makes the practical, unethical things that we already do, or ethically ambiguous things, they become even more efficient, right? So is there any move to control this, or can it even be controlled?
Yeah, I always think that at the base of it all, all technology is a tool to amplify human effort, good effort or bad effort, right? So AI is no different in that. It's just that the scale and
Speed.
the amplification is several factors more. What can we do to kind of, at least the malicious use or the unethical use is one part, and some of the things which are like inadvertently going wrong, that's another part. And we need a combination of policy, representational data, and some kind of, awareness of the context in which the AI is going to be deployed. Because, it's not just like, you'll take a model, AI model and put it out there. There'll be people who will be building applications on top of it so that, end users can use it. It can happen in all kinds of different ways. So along the pipeline, you have to worry about, where are the biases creeping in? Is it the data? Is it at the algorithmic level, or is it at the use case level, application level? And also, there have to be equivalent policies in place to tackle things going wrong, say for a malicious use of AI. So I think it has to be a combination of tech, social understanding, the people part, and a much more legal and governance view on how AI is used.
So, Tanvi, what are the unethical uses of AI you see happening over the years?
So I think more than unethical uses, I think there is just low awareness. And the fact that many a times, think of this ecosystem as supply and demand. From the supply side, you have startups, you have teams, very enthusiastic folks who want to build and sometimes want to build domain-specific solutions, but lack the context of that domain or specific things around. For example, if you build in education, right, and you're building a tool for students who are likely minors, do you get consent from minors? Do you get consent from caregivers? Very similarly in healthcare, if you're building a tool which maybe is going to be implemented by an ASHA worker, but is for the last mile beneficiary, have you really thought about that context and are familiar with it? And is that entrepreneur familiar with it? So from the supply side, what we see is that sometimes they're not even thinking about the right questions because they just don't understand the domain enough. They understand the AI tech part enough, and they are fast, they're agile. But sometimes they just need introduction and forums where they could communicate with domain experts and actually what's happening on the field. Now on the demand side also, more than unethical use, what we hope to trigger with adopters, right? The demand side is, how do you think about ethics? What should you be concerned about when you are looking to adopt AI, or when you're thinking that maybe now I can connect with more citizens or with more patients or with more students or teachers, right? If you're thinking about a context, have you really thought about, what's that checklist? Do you even have a checklist? Do you have a practical toolkit that you can use if you have started looking at technology vendors and you're maybe thinking about voice AI or text-based AI solutions? Do you really understand what's going on behind the system? And for it to apply, do you really understand what could be the negatives, right? So let's say, and this is a very common thing you do when you're developing drugs and medical devices, right? You do a risk analysis. You really analyze, risk management is a very big part of AI as well, because you are thoughtfully sitting down and thinking through not just the product, right, that's going to come to you, but you're thinking about the risks of the product. So when it comes to really risk analysis, ethics, responsible AI, and very simple example is, and Kalika said this, right? Data is so important in this context. Let's say you're talking to someone in Assam, and you don't have the right data sets for Assamese. You don't understand that local taxonomy. You don't understand the dialects. You don't understand profanity in Assamese. But you've created a tool which might not work well because it just doesn't understand that local context. So now you need to be thinking of what model has the technology vendor used, or what data sets is that model trained on? Can I provide some data sets from my context so that that solution can get better? So it's not as black and white as what are the unethical risks, but really, have you thought about risks? And how do you go about this thinking?
So there's this question in an Indian context that when you're trying to make, I call it do-gooding, the social sector more efficient. But to do that, what the AI is going to do is take away many jobs. And I feel, many things that Indians do is a form of unemployment, like I think half of Indian Railways and all my security guards in my building, but we need to do that because we need to employ people. Now, how are you reconciling an efficient medium which can do something very well without people, but at the same time creating some kind of an unemployment even as you try to do good?
So first of all, I don't think that the social sector jobs are going away. I think they might increase in the context of this current world. So I think we will likely, still be employed. So will the security guards, I'll have you know. But the rest of us might be in trouble.
Writers.
but I think that, yes, I agree. So as we were speaking earlier as well, is that these are technologies that developed in labor deficit markets and are being deployed in labor surplus markets. So there will be some equalizing that we will have to do over the next 5 years. So yes, do I think robots are coming? They're not. Do I think that there will be job replacement in small ways? Yes, there will be. So for me, personally, the sector that I think is most vulnerable is actually the BPO sector, which obviously had been the bedrock of India's services industry. And I think whatever million jobs that we have there are in at least maybe the lower level ones are in imminent danger, because Tanvi had recently organized a demo day for People Plus AI, and there were multiple entities that were demonstrating products where they can do voice tech really well. So your Swiggy recruitment and things like that can happen very easily, and which were actually just jobs that were being given to BPOs, right? Now there's going to be a way of creating other jobs, which is stuff that Kalika and I both work on, which is like data labeling, right? There's a lot of data labeling work. So there are going to be new jobs, potentially not so satisfying, jobs in that long arc of how we think about our work in relation to identity, etc. There will be jobs that are created in the immediate term to fulfill the needs of this rapidly growing AI sort of engine. So I think that, again, to the point of like the horse carts, we were having this conversation about like photography, like given that, like again, Kalika's example of given that we all have cameras in our phones, is photography not a thing anymore as all of these cameras sit here and people behind them? So I think that there will be a way to realign this, and I'm not saying and I think that in that context, the government in particular has to play a very critical role in thinking about how we regulate this space, right? The question of use cases is important. Where do we deploy these technologies carefully, and where we say, okay, fine, we need a little bit of more time to figure this out while we create jobs for people? How do we create social security nets that are actually going to hold all of this together? Because there will be chaos. Because, I mean, profit-seeking entities like Accenture, who can do this with 20 people and, a reasonably trained voice model, are not going to take contracts from Airbnb anymore to do that, right? Like, which is what Accenture does. So there will be chaos, and I think that our responsibility, both as watchers of this space, analyzers of this space, and hopefully people who in the media or through the government can reflect that regulation is necessary. How do we build in context? How do we make sure that jobs are secure in the context that jobs are not? How do we think about skills? I don't think India is thinking long enough or in the long term about skills. If you're going to have 1 million people unemployed from the BPO industry, what skills do they need to be relevant, right? How do we move them up the ladder? If people are doing data labeling today, but 2 years later, AI labeled data is going to be available, synthetic data is going to be, normalized. What are these women we've been creating jobs for sitting at home to label, water tanks? What are they going to do, right? So I think we have to think critically about skills. I think we have to think about labor displacement. Where does that go? And I think we have to think much more critically about regulation. I think we're behind by maybe like 3 to 5 years. So those would be my highlights. So yeah, so there is going to be chaos because we're not Japan, right? Like, we're not going to need these systems in the same way, in that immediacy. We will need them 3 to 5 years from now, but I think that we need to prep for the immediate term.
So I want to now speak outside the social sector, generally, the next 6 minutes before we open the proceedings to the audience, I have a philosophical question, like why should anybody be employed, in jobs that they don't want to do? Like, for example, the definition of poverty, a form of poverty, is that you have to do something that you don't want to do. Like the guy sometimes in the lift is just pressing the buttons, and they look like zombies because after a time, it is something even a zombie won't do. So why should people be employed? Why can't modernity be about using technology like AI to abolish jobs?
I think that's a very interesting philosophy. I mean, I often say that, if I am redundant, like I don't have any work to do, then I have been actually very successful at my work. But I say it from a very, very definite position of privilege.
Yeah.
Right? Philosophically, there is like a whole stream of research that looks into anti-work, theories and anti-work philosophies, which aim at exactly what you're doing. The reason I know this is because a friend of mine actually is an expert on these anti-work. He's a scholar of this anti-work thing. But currently, in a practical way, is it even feasible? Who is going to pick up the tab? Right? Who is going to pay for this? Right now, most of AI is controlled by commercial entities. So what is the purpose of a commercial entity? To make money.
To maximize profits.
Maximize profits. So where are those profits going to come from? Who is going to buy this stuff so that everybody stops working? Like, where is the entropy of the system going to be?
Which was Marx's question, if there is nobody who's employed, who's going to buy? But it looks like the American billionaires are very keen on, so they've figured out something that the money will keep coming, even if nobody is buying, or maybe only the rich would buy.
I actually don't know so many American billionaires, not even one. So I actually am not very well placed to answer.
So actually, I've also noticed that people hate their jobs, especially if it's boring jobs, but there is an immense human satisfaction when they do something well. Even a waiter whose job is very tough, and when they've done a good job, you give a compliment. They like it. So maybe people are overrating not doing anything. So Tanvi, in your experience, what is the relationship between people and employment and satisfaction?
See, I think, and I'm going to put this in the context of AI, I genuinely think AI is now allowing people to follow their passion in terms of learning. And, if you're curious, today, now, the flip side of that labor question is, sure, there is a lot of foundational components like data labeling, data centers and model building and training that needs to happen. But on the other side of things, if today you have someone sitting in a tier 2 or 3 city who maybe does not have a design university in their city or town, today generative AI and AI in general is making it possible to get personalized education based on your interests, which I think just opens up an avenue where even if you don't like your job today, you today staying in your existing job, which pays the bills, could learn something that tomorrow could help you get to that next sort of frontier. So, and again, like Kalika said, right, who ultimately, people have to pay the bills and have to kind of live their life. But today, we are breaking access barriers for a lot of people on the education front. Also think of it this way, right? It's not just purely curiosity and learning. Let's say today you have someone who wants to be a lawyer, who doesn't even want to service the legal requirements, the legal demand in India. But today, sitting in India, being trained through something that is maybe AI developed or AI powered, you could maybe service customers globally.
That's
right?
ironic because I just checked ChatGPT to scan a contract that I got instead of using a lawyer, and it raised some 6 good points. So, but you're still saying that the human lawyer would still be relevant because...
I really think human in the loop is very important. And we also think of AI technology as being assistive, as amplifying the existing person. You can't replace a doctor, you can't replace a ASHA worker, but you can make them more powerful. You can actually have them do more strategic work, which needs to be done, but is not getting done. Because they're just so busy in doing some of the more basic things that AI could do. So you could just make work better, I feel.
Great. On that note, we'll take questions from the audience, and I have a request that you can masquerade your opinions as questions, but keep it very brief. Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. You mentioned about skills which India is currently not working on. I want you to give few skills which a person should work. Please be as specific as you can.
Oh, you tell me. Should we just go, or you want to gather a few questions?
Whatever you want. Yeah. Oh no,
Your
no.
call.
You're specific to this. Yeah, you can answer question
Okay,
by question.
answer. Yeah, okay. I think that, and you should probably add as well, is that we've seen, say, prompt engineering as a skill that's come up again. I think that I actually have a much more traditional thing, is like the ability to analyze problems, the ability to break things down in a much more critical way. Critical thinking, I think, is a skill that we should be all acquiring now, given that we have such a huge cognitive load in trying to figure out real from non-real, usable from non-usable. So I think that there's a specificity in terms of what's the cost that you could do, but also skills in terms of a much more metacognitive question. But I'll also pass this to Kalika, who'll probably have a better answer.
I actually have no idea. I'm being very honest. Well, critical thinking has been, I think, is a requirement for all human beings across the world at any time in the history of humanity. So I agree with all that, but I actually have no idea about what kind of very specific jobs are going to come into the future, because I'm not a futurist. There are people who specialize in that. I'm not.
Well, that's a new job. Futurist.
Yeah, that's a new job.
But there was this meme, sorry to interrupt, but there was this thing to be like, if we can just train models to do our housework and all of that, then all of us can be writers, and filmmakers, and really pour ourselves into the creative economy. So, again, there is some sort of
So you're saying that I'm a writer because I don't do housework?
Possibly.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
Final year, sir. I'm here.
He's over there. He's
Yeah.
on that side.
Madam, you just touched upon this one, AI for good governance. See, all this four estate, we have a lot of backup of cases in judiciary, and a lot of tenders happen in the government, which is not monitored. But how can AI help on monitoring all the four estates? Judiciary, governance, and elected representatives, along with what media give a flare-up of all the things. Maybe AI can support on that?
I think there are lots of people who are working in those areas actually. Very specifically, I know that in the legal and the side, there are a lot of organizations. I don't want to name them, but there are quite a few organizations which are actually working on supporting caseloads, supporting judiciary, supporting lawyers, supporting consumers on how to get using AI. So there are a whole bunch of such entities. We are right now at a stage that everybody is very excited about AI. So a lot of these use cases are being handled. So yes, there are.
My question was,
I'm
AI, can we bring it down to the governance level, urban, local?
It is at the
being
governance
used. Yeah.
level.
So that is a catchment
What is it,
where we can
Kochi,
employ AI in
codes,
good governance. Thank you.
E-codes, Kochi, and
Do you want to-
ODR and all of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
There are lots of such things.
With this, but you know that President Trump has posted on Truth Social after a long night of talks mediated by the United States. I'm pleased to announce that India and Pakistan have agreed to a full and immediate ceasefire.
Excellent.
And he says, congratulations to both countries on using common sense and great intelligence. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
This is excellent
Thank
news.
you.
On that note, I'm told that the time is strictly
Yes.
up. I'm sorry, we have to close the proceedings, but
Yeah.
great, so many lives saved. But I'm sorry, I'm told that Okay, so that gentleman, there's a popular demand that that gentleman ask a question, so I don't know why. Can someone give the mic to him and then...
The readers.
And this is what AI couldn't have done.
Yeah. Maybe critical thinking.
Yeah.
Itself is really confusing. It says AI for all. Who decides this? We say we have a democratic and ethical technology. In a society like India, where excessive greed of the few people are in constant conflict with the millions of people suffering, and in this kind of society, we are going to have AI. Are we losing our common sense altogether? What kind of society are we going to introduce AI? Please ask me the question.
Okay, on that very angry note, thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for being here. That was lovely.